Hello all, this is David Lankus. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. A few more people might join us as we come in. I really appreciate you coming in for our first webcast. Just so you know, we're going to record this and make the recording available through the Collaboratory site. So if you're signed in under your real name and are supposed to be somewhere else, now would be the time to slip out and come in with a new moniker. But here we go. Good. Okay. So, by now you have had a chance, hopefully, to look through the second edition of the Expect More book. We've been doing different updates and talking to different partners. And this really, in June, begins our transition from the sort of writing and editing phase to the more instructional design and providing courses and materials. We've been working with different partners to go and try out presentations, messaging, material, and training with our different partners. And that will be soon seen in the kind of materials we're making available. And Kathryn, who's been instrumental in the development of the project and the thinking, and is a fantastic editor for the book and a partner on the whole project, has agreed to get us started talking about how we can take some of these ideas, how we can utilize some of the materials, and really, pardon me, begin engaging in a conversation with our communities. So, Kathryn has a huge amount of experience in working with libraries of all types all around the world, really, in facilitating these kinds of meetings and discussions. So I look forward to participating here. One other quick comment, which is for those of you going to ALA in a couple of weeks here, on the Tuesday of ALA, we are having a half-day session open to all around the concept of how do we make people aware of the expertise and power of librarians in addition to advocating for libraries. So I'll invite you to there, and more material will be available through the Expect More site. So with that, Kathryn, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm here if you need me.
Thanks, David. One note for everybody who has mics: if you mute your mic until you want to speak, that cuts down on the static on the line. We've learned over time. So, but we're very welcoming of people using the mics if they have them. If not, we'll assume that the conversation will be taking place in the chat box. This is very much a chat conversation. This is not a presentation. It's actually to start talking about around a few questions related to the content of Expect More, the second edition. So I hope that people will engage, and if you haven't tried things out yet, at least be willing to sort of brainstorm what you might try out with others, because I think we can all learn from one another about sort of really paying attention to how to engage the community and getting the community to expect more. I mean, one of the things that I thought of after I put a few questions together here with David is that, and this, maybe we can start with this question, which is not on the slides, is, what scares us about our communities expecting more? Is there something scary about getting our communities to expect more from us? I'll just open with that for a few minutes and see if anybody has something to say about that. There's that issue of be careful what you wish for. Success can be difficult. So what if we're unable to deliver is always a worry. What if everybody comes and we can't handle it, or what if what they expect isn't what we can actually offer or haven't been able to offer? And Sue is saying yes, because then we have to deliver. Exactly. It's sort of, you tell them to expect more, you say you're going to do it, and then you have to do it. we've got people typing, so I'm just waiting. Scope creep can be a bad thing. Yes, Heather, I mean, I think that is something to consider. What is the scope? And I mean, for decades we've talked about, well, should we do this or should we do that? Is that still the scope of our mission? But when funders start to ask those questions, it can get really tricky. David's enabled everybody's microphone, so if anybody wants to speak up. So success can be not so much scary as preventive. The concept that we might be successful can prevent us sometimes from pushing for greater expectation on the part of people who are the members of our libraries. The other thing that I think can happen is that some of us who are highly successful can learn to rest on past successes as sort of the reason for our existence. And I've known organizations that have rested on their past successes, and their past successes were brilliant. But if your past successes are always in the past, if your successes are always in the past, then you're not, moving forward. So good opening conversation here. As you can see, we've got people's names here, but if some of you who only have your name could say where you're from or where you are, that might help the group understand the shape of the group. And I'll just continue here, but you can be typing where you're from. Fayetteville. Thank you, Bernadette. So as people are typing where they're coming from, we thought we'd open with this question of, based on the assumption that there are conversations that are being held with community members, sort of what is it that you hope to get out of those conversations with community members? What are the kinds of things that you think are critical that could come from conversations with community members? Hopes and dreams, getting at people's real desires. And people sometimes are not used to having their desires inquired about. They're more used to having the vision explained to them as opposed to having them supply some of that. A lot of people typing. Feel free to take advantage of the mic if you have one. So I think that's really important about the kind of talent, expertise, and passions that exist already in the community, and give you a better sense of the sort of, really, in a way, the heart and brain trusts of the community. It can be very various, but gives you some sense of it in if you have these conversations. And that they would be ambassadors for you, Maine. That's good. So somebody's laughing. I think that we start these conversations and hope that people will engage with us and and provide some of this information. But I think that one of the things that David writes about in Expect More is, or one of the premises is that, the idea that they own it, that they own the library. The library is theirs, and you can say that to people, the library is yours, but that's not always enough to get them to really understand what we mean by that, or what David means in Expect More. So I think this next question might help us think about that. In what ways can we help community members realize the investment they need to make in their libraries? And what does that investment look like? And just to set this up a little bit for us to have a conversation here, people invest in their families, they invest in their homes, they invest in their faith communities, and other kinds of communities that they're involved in. And I think that investment, we might think of it in terms of money often, but sometimes engagement. But what are we looking for when we think about them owning the library, their investment, the sense that they would invest enough to think that they own the library? So, Sue, talking about the investment in each other, in a stronger community, do you mean the more people invest together, the more it strengthens the fabric of the community? Or have conversations about that investment? We've got a lot of people typing. So, Bernadette, you're saying advocacy and the willingness to share their unique characteristics as a library asset. Individuals' unique characteristics as a library asset, you mean? And then also advocating for what they own, advocating for the library. I think this is a little bit of a shift in the national conversation, at least in the United States, where it's not just about us going out with begging bowls and asking for money or investment in us, but in asking, and that's what David's work is based on, is asking the community to consider its investment in itself and consider the librarians to be an investment in the community itself. So Nichols is presenting a twist on this, and I like this. If the library is invested out in the community and present there, people will be more likely to learn about the library and be more aware of the need to invest in the library. So a reciprocal relationship. I think that being invested in the community is a really big piece of these conversations. So if we show that we're co-owners of the community ourselves, then we have that joint interest in supporting not just the library, but the entire community. So the library can be, Sue's saying the library can be a catalyst to the opening of conversations about what's important, valued in the community. And the library is a facilitator of these conversations about value, what's valued. Yeah, very proud of Shawnee, Topeka and Shawnee. Very, very exciting news. Library of the Year. A lot of facilitation. So how is that? How is that different? Yeah, yay, Kansas. How is that different from what we've all learned about what librarianship is? I mean, this seems to me, and I know many of your libraries have been doing this for some years, but how do we see ourselves as a profession, and how do we see how do we help community members see us differently? It seems to me this really has been a changed number of years in the making. And Knuckles, yes, I assumed that Topeka was there. Yes, Sue, somebody.
This is Heather at Knuckles, and I've got Anna and Mike and Robin with me. And I'll just address your question. I think what has changed has been libraries have been very insular with, turning inward and looking at our own needs, serving the people that are coming in our doors. And I think there's been a lot of recognition over the last 10 years or so that there's a lot of people not using libraries. And there's a lot of people not coming into our buildings. And as stuff has moved online, we need to be reaching those people that aren't coming in our doors. And on top of that, there's also been at the same time a recognition that our communities have a lot of needs that need to be met that aren't being addressed. And the library is that one institution that is still trusted in communities when a lot of others aren't. And we have no skin in the game in terms of business, making profit, a political agenda, anything like that. And so we're that one trusted institution that has its fingers, whether we realize it or not, in all the areas of our community. And the time has come for us to, I guess, turn outward. And so I think it's just been a perfect storm of a lot of different things that have coalesced all at once. And at the same time, a willingness to collaborate. I don't think that was always there in the library profession, and suddenly collaboration is a huge part of what we do.
I'm sorry, I had muted my mic. Other comments about what Heather has said or what Knuckles folks have said there? Decades in the making, yes. And this neutral space, it's neutral, but when you have a lot of passion around something, it's hard to imagine it as neutral. So there's a kind of push-pull there for both the ownership, on the ownership side of this, as well as for us. And yet, this is not, as you say, there's not a political aspect to it. So it is a neutral space, neutral place, and a neutral, whether it's virtual or bricks and mortar. So anybody else want to comment on that? David's saying collaboration beyond the library in particular. So this investment means we have to find ways to explain to people that it is theirs and they can actually bring their passion to it. And in the best libraries, some of which are represented here, many of which are represented here, that's already happening, has been happening for quite a while. So helping our colleagues not worry less and sort of move to it, move to the ball, as they say in soccer, more, and it can only help. And so Sue, David, did you mean beyond outside our industry, collaboration beyond the library? But in any case, I agree with you, Sue. Go ahead, David.
Just the comment was that we, as a profession, we're becoming much better at collaboration. And I would agree that on principle, we've always talked about collaboration amongst libraries and librarians and library organizations, but increasingly seeing that we are collaborating across industry types, not-for-profit and for-profit, governments, and outside of sort of traditional boundaries. I think there's much more openness to doing that now, and I think that the neutral space, just because it's a personal issue with me, it's a civic space, it's a welcoming space, it's an open space, it's a space dedicated to learning. I don't think we could ever quite call it neutral. Non-ideological, absolutely, but we shape that space, how it physically looks, who can come in, what are the opportunities, what are the policies, how does it get scheduled. So it's never truly neutral. We've been empowered by our communities, whether they're physical communities, whether they're academic communities, business communities, to maintain and curate that space. But that takes care and feeding. It doesn't just happen by saying here's a big round circle, people come in and do with it as you please. We really do spend a lot of time in a trusted way, making sure that that space is ready for collaboration and discussion by all members of the community.
I had muted my mic so that David wouldn't have interference there. And I think you write about this, David, in the book. I know you do, about this neutrality being not truly neutral in the pure sense of the word, but that it is safe, that it is a place of coming together and convening, not just convening many, but maybe even convening a person with an idea. So there are a lot of different intersections that can be approached when we think of ourselves as that space. And unfortunately, we keep having experiences where the library becomes crucial to the psychological and emotional health of a city or of a place, as we've learned with Orlando recently, and just they're putting together things that make the libraries central to the support of everybody around them. And it's not just here are the resources, it's join with us and we join with you. So it's a really powerful shift, I think. So Paula, you're saying you think sometimes it's difficult in libraries to bring the team along. Sometimes we have staff that like to do what they like to do and are taking responsibility, and measuring success can be seen as the not fun part, right? So it's a leadership issue. I think as many of you know, I do a lot of leadership development, and I think it is a really significant leadership issue. One of the really interesting books that I use sometimes in leadership training or even in my own life is, your mic is not working, Paula. I don't know if David can do something about that. Is Carol Dweck's book on called Mindset. So she talks about how there are two mindsets. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset can be painful, and on a personal level as well as on an organizational level. And so she has a lot of really interesting things to say. I highly recommend the book, Carol Dweck, if you haven't seen it. All right, let's move on to another question here. And I know many of you are doing this to the max. So David talks about, from the grocery store to the kitchen, from providing consumer goods to creative space or creating space. I just was curious if you would share with each other here what the hallmarks are of community members that are both consumers of library services writ large, and creators. I mean, what are those hallmarks? What are the characteristics of these people, and so on? Oh, David Lankus is giving credit to Joan Fry Williams for the grocery store, library as grocery store idea versus library as kitchen. So when we think about, and you've talked already about people actually bringing their knowledge and their understanding, and their skills, their talents in to the community and into the library. What are the hallmarks of that action, with those actions? So people are really, interestingly, people want to share, want to give back, and want to pay forward. And I think that you see that, and it's not just older people who now want to pay it forward because they've had such a great life. I see young people wanting to pay it forward too, and so it's this very strong human need to share. And to pass around the gifts. I think that's it's a very powerful instinct in human nature. I like that, Sue, about it's their agenda we're looking to facilitate. And Maine, yeah, if they have a vision for what they want to do and the passion to make it happen, those are two things that are really necessary to create, right? You have to have an idea about what you want to do, and then the drive and passion to keep going, even, and knowing that you know, from idea to fruition, it doesn't happen overnight and doesn't happen without roadblocks and so on. So that passion pushes people through the hard moments of creating. But, and I think I think there are a couple of libraries. I'm trying to remember which library it is that's thinking of itself as library as studio. Is it Richland? It might be Richland Library in South Carolina. Library as studio. The idea that there are many things that can happen in a studio. You know, scholarly study can happen in a studio. Art, music, a lot of different creating. So Lawrence Public Library has a sound and vision studio, recording studio, where the library is tapping into a huge local community music scene, and the talent is coming to the facility, or to the tools. So if you provide the tools, the talent comes. So thinking about this in relation to what Paula brought up about bringing staff along, since this is a shift in the way we look at ourselves, how have some of you solved the issue or worked on the issue of bringing staff along? It's one thing for the leader of the senior leader or the leadership team or the leaders of departments to be on board, but how do you help bring people through this change, and understanding that actually their job content may be more interesting if they open up to this idea. Interesting, Maine. That's great that you're going to be doing a staff read and a statewide read. That's great. I think it'll be very interesting to hear of your experiences, and we hope that you'll share those after you do that read. I think the issue that Paula brought up is one that I hear a lot when I work as a consultant, so I'm curious as to how others have worked on that. Heather, that's great. Role of the librarian think tanks. Excellent. Culture. Yes, culture eats strategy for breakfast, exactly. And so you can have all the strategic planning you want, and the culture can remain the same, and very difficult to move things forward. On the other hand, as a student of organizational culture for decades, I can say that, and many of you will probably have experienced this, you can't change culture overnight, because there's a reason why organizational culture exists. It's a powerful assist in the success of the organization. The problem is when the environment changes and the culture doesn't, the assumptions in the culture don't go along with that change in the environment. Getting people involved in. So a word that Sue uses here that I think is really powerful is the staff have to have the invitation to be part of either the establishment or the evolution of, I would say, the establishment and evolution of a culture. And you all know how culture is taught to new members of the organization, right? It's the way that culture with a big C is conveyed to others, and that is story. Culture is conveyed through story, taught through story, and so it's natural that we tell stories about how things work here. And so when you're bringing new people into the library, new staff members, the stories you tell those new staff members have embedded in them the culture of the organization. And being very aware of the stories you're telling might be very important if you want to build a particular culture. I like that, Sue, that it's not overnight, but but if you don't give it a high priority, you're just going to be butting your head against the wall for a long time. Strategic doing instead of strategic planning. I love it. There's one academic library that I know of that started a culture change 15 years ago, and if you were to ask them today, are you done? They would say, no, we're still changing it. It's that deep, and sometimes it depends on how much you are trying to change things, right? Never done. But this issue of how we teach others about our culture, I think is supremely important, and can really, especially when changes of this nature have taken place, and there are expectations and assumptions about who we are and who the community members are, who the users, quote unquote, are, then you have an even greater responsibility to tell the stories that build the culture that you want to see happen. I'm going to move us to the next question just because I think this question is sort of less interesting than some of the other questions here, than the answers you all are providing. So I think this has almost been answered already, but maybe just a little discussion. Or unless you want to, do you all? I'm flexible here. Do you want to keep talking about this culture thing and because Heather just said restructuring the work schedule to get give staff space to do things differently, less desk time. So I'm happy to take this wherever you all want to go. We don't have to answer the question that's on the screen. We can talk about this issue. This is a pretty deep issue, actually, about culture and about changing the way we work, thinking together. Sometimes people are so task-driven that the idea of having dialogues, which is what I would call thinking together, is really difficult because dialogue is an open-ended conversation with no decision at the end of it, and people are really not comfortable with when they're not checking stuff off the list. So thinking together is I think takes a lot more explanation and sort of acclimating for people who are driven to do. And that discomfort, yes, requires a culture change. So it's sort of a ring within a ring. I'm waiting for Knuckles. They're typing something. So thinking time is really important. We work with a lot of one to two person public libraries as well, and the thinking is non-existent and yet critical to drive change forward. Well, when you have a one-person library is somebody thinking with themselves, and that's pretty tricky. So if you don't give them partners or sort of trail walkers or something, you've got to find ways to help people in these smaller libraries. I think that where the conversation is hard to have when you have a very small group of people, especially 2 people or less. And yes, and no time to get away from the library because they're serving all the time. So spending time at meetings and training can help expand people's views, but the sort of think tank, let's just sit down and think about what you know about the way things have been in your little library and how things might change in your little rural library or small library in a small community. That thinking partnership, I see that as different than a meeting or a training. And I think training and meeting is very important. So it's not like I'm saying you shouldn't do that. I definitely think those things are important. I think this thinking partnership might be something that would help in these smaller situations. Leave the egos and the titles at the door so that risky thinking can happen safely. And I think it takes a while for many people to understand what you mean when you say things like that. And I think also some people are not really so much attached to their titles as they are attached to their ideas and their ideas about the way things work and what can happen and what can't happen. So they're mental models of what's possible. And the idea that the community owns the library is a mental model that is different from the library serves the community, but we run it and we decide things. Yeah, Heather is saying, a big spread out library system, it is hard for groups to think together, to make the time to gather people, and to get the commitment to spend time, open-ended time, thinking together. So if it's difficult, what are the possible enticements? When the reasoning is there's no time, there's not enough time, there's too much separation miles wise, how do you incentivize thinking together? And what happens if you also, I mean, I think this is at the heart of David's work as well, with Expect More, if you bring the community members in to do the think tanks with you, not so much as, let's talk about librarianship, but let's talk about what you want to see happen here, about vision. Yeah. So the enticements are getting your ideas heard, voicing your frustrations, identifying barriers, and moving stuff out of the way to move ideas forward in a collaborative way. And beginning to identify what behavior is really collaborative as opposed to cooperative. I mean, you know, when you're cooperative, you're saying, I'm going to do something and you're going to do something and something will happen out of that, but we still have our separate things. When you collaborate, you're doing things together for the common good or a common outcome. And there's more of a merging, and I think that sometimes cooperation is what we end up with when we really want collaboration. So getting staff to think collaboratively, which means that whole business about starting to nibble away at silos and so on, or at least getting them to be permeable so that people can move right through the walls of them. And that's part of culture as well. So Heather, you invited noted speakers in different areas like technology and culture and so on to speak, and members of the communities in those sectors, yeah, to engage when you were doing planning. That's great. So collaboration is something that, you know, funders want to see in the grant proposals, and that is a sort of a really prized activity and way of doing things. But I think sometimes we and maybe we're doing it more than we think we are, and maybe we need to notice it more and say, this is where it's happening. See, this is what we mean. This is what we mean when we say collaboration, this exact thing that's happening here. So pointing it out, because I think sometimes it's happening and we're not even honoring it out loud so that people realize we're not calling it out. So this idea of thinking together, or think tanks, is a powerful one to help librarians and library staff understand new roles and new ways of working with the community. Bringing the community into those think tanks is, I think, a really interesting idea, and many libraries have been doing that to varying degrees of success. So I think there's also that possibility of just creating open spaces where people can talk about how do we change in the direction that the community wants to see the library change. and how do we collaborate? With whom do we collaborate? Because obviously, one of the issues with librarians in particular is that the let's do everything for everyone all the time sort of tendency is not a bad. It's a great. The underlying value is fabulous, but I think you have to think about what exactly does that mean, and what gets lost when you try to do that, and maybe bringing more focus to it by getting the input of the community members is the key piece. I love it, Heather. Having users bring non-users to the discussion table. Fabulous. That's a really great idea. And what has happened there, Heather? What's been the nature of that conversation when the non-users are in the room? So while people are typing, I'll say, I really believe that when we talk about politics as a bad thing, as a negative thing, we lead staff to believe that they don't have, that they shouldn't have a political point of view. And by political point of view, I mean, whenever we get two or more people in a room, we have a political system. And so a community is a political system. The community working with the library is a political act. And by political, I don't mean, governmental politics. I mean, it's a sociological thing. And so we have to think about timing. Whenever you think about political systems, all sorts of things come into play. Timing comes into play. What is it that you're trying to do? You have to be clear with one another. You have to agree on what important words mean, and so on. And diplomacy is a part of it. So, Heather, you're saying a lot of learning took place in two directions. They learned about the library, but they gave us a lot of insight into why they don't use the library. Wow. And so, are you going to keep doing this? So you did it a few times and you're going to keep doing it, Heather? So as I understand it, Heather, you're saying that you actually invite people who are users to identify friends of theirs or people they know who never come to the library and to bring them, and that's the strategy you use as opposed to you trying to identify them. That's really brilliant. A great practice, I think, for others to try. And Heather's typing for us here. Ten of these discussions. Wow. Fabulous. I bet you learned a lot, and I think that's just fascinating. And so what the idea, I assume, is not, well, let's do a conversion here. A conversion, like a religious conversion where suddenly all these non-users become users exactly, but the idea was learning, right? The focus was learning. And I imagine that kind of discussion can change the conversation after the fact when the staff is alone and thinking about, well, what happened there? Learning what people want that we're not doing. Yeah. Excellent. Really, really interesting. Well, in the interest of moving along on time here, because we have till 1 o'clock, David put forth this mission of New Library in the Atlas of New Librarianship. He put forth this vision about the mission of the library changing, and so the question here is how can community members be helped to see that the mission of a library is to improve society through facilitating knowledge creation in a community? What is it? This is a big question, and it may not be something we can fully answer here, but what is it that you can do to help community members see this as the mission? I like that, David. So the paraphrase here is helping our communities make smarter choices. Thank you, Sue. I understand you have to go. Appreciated your participation. So Maine is... do we have 2 installations at Maine signed on here? I think we do. 2 different locations. Yeah. So Maine State Library 2 is typing. So identify key people who have a voice in the community and invite them to make to come in and suggest invite them to make is what I got confused there. Maine is on the move. Yeah, if you could clarify that, which you're doing right now, I see. To create knowledge so that they can see the library as a venue for that, and that's really powerful change in the way people see what happens in a library. The fact that people can go and David has pictures of his son holding up a little model that he built at a makerspace and at Fayetteville, and so I think that when people are able to do what they want to do, create what they want to create in the library, they begin to see that role of the library being different than books and stuff, which was what OCLC discovered was the brand of libraries, books and stuff, when they did that perception study, which was like in the 90s, in the early 2000s. Oh, so you mean to invite the community to create knowledge so that they see the library as a venue for that. Great. Not just creating gadgets and stuff or 3D printing, but to create knowledge. And that's a very big leap for a lot of community members, since knowledge has been between the covers of a bound book or on the screen of some trusted website or mistrusted website. The idea that they're creating knowledge is, I think, that is a leap. An open data book club and create knowledge together. Wow, Heather, you guys are doing amazing, interesting things. A lot of creating. And I think and the key here is the library is facilitating. The library isn't doing the creating by itself. In some cases they're co-creating, in other cases they're just purely facilitating the ability to do this. So these are great ideas and great projects. I love the idea of a community novel. That's fun. Well, that's fabulous. We're at the 1 o'clock hour, which is our end time. We want to thank you. David and I really encourage all of you to consider volunteering to facilitate one of these conversations, one of the collaboratory conversations. If you find questions as you're working through the ideas in Expect More, if you find something to pivot around that you think you'd like to get other people involved in, just let David know, and I'm sure he'll make a space available for you to lead a conversation. We really want the community in the collaboratory to sort of own this, just the way we want community members to own the library. So this collaboratory is being created for you all to own. And so we really appreciate the engagement here today and the ideas, and hope that some of you will volunteer to facilitate conversations in the future. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you have a great day, the rest of it, and that you got something out of this. Do let us give David some feedback on this. That would be great. And me too.
Thanks, Kathryn. That's great. And absolutely, just to follow up with what you said, if any of you, there's some great projects that have already been brought up here. If you guys want some chance to talk amongst ourselves about that, please let me know. We can provide this kind of infrastructure or point to it where you're already doing it. A big part of the collaboratory shift now is, instead of us writing and creating, is really trying to share ideas back and forth. So anything we can do to help. Kathryn, as always, a great facilitating discussion. Hope to see many of you in Orlando in a couple of weeks, otherwise online. Thanks very much.